At this moment, we have 22 patients in the United States currently that have coronavirus. Unfortunately, one person passed away overnight. We've taken the most aggressive actions to confront the coronavirus. There's no reason to panic.
That was the president yesterday. Health officials working hard to contain the coronavirus as one American is confirmed dead, marking the first virus-related death in the U.S.
Here now with more insight is a member of the White House's coronavirus task force, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Doctor, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you.
We have 3 new travel-restricted countries now: Iran, Italy, South Korea. Many of our viewers watched the presser yesterday that was held by the president, Vice President Pence, and you yourself spoke quite a bit. Are there any updates that you can give us this morning?
No, it's the same as we said at the press conference. What we're seeing right now is what's called community spread. Namely, we're having people popping up who are infected with no known original source or index case, which makes it much more challenging because the other cases, it was clear where the infection was coming from and where they got infected, such as the travel-related cases. When you have the cases that we're having now in Washington State and in Oregon, it becomes much more challenging because you got to do much more intensive contact tracing in addition to the isolation. So this is something that was entirely expected when you have diffuse infections throughout the world, as you just mentioned, South Korea, Iran, Italy, and places like that. Sooner or later, there are going to be cases in your country that you can't directly trace to anyone. That becomes much more challenging about identifying the source.
Dr. Fauci, a lot of people are comparing the symptoms and even actually the disease itself to having the flu. Is that an accurate comparison, or is it much worse or much less worse?
You know, yes and no. In some respects, the comparison is appropriate, but in others, it's not. For example, the seasonal flu mortality is about 0.1%. Thus far, from the information that we've gotten, particularly from China, the mortality of this disease is around 2%, 2.3%, maybe a little bit lower if you count all the cases, but it clearly is much more lethal, if you want to call it that, than the typical seasonal flu.
Doctor, there's been much made in the media about how this is being messaged, who's talking about it, and when. But the Washington Post took it to another level, accusing you of effectively being muzzled. Here's part of what they wrote in the Washington Post on Thursday. It said, Fauci is probably the most respected public health official in the United States. There is no one better equipped to explain what is happening with the coronavirus. Now he's being muzzled. How do you respond to the claim that you're not able to speak freely about the state of the coronavirus right now?
Well, I just would tell people to take a look at their television right now. What am I doing? I'm speaking freely. I think there was a misrepresentation. Yeah. Whenever you get a request to go on any show, there's always a formal process that's generally routine of clearance. And when the vice president's people took over on essentially being the person overseeing the task force, they said, let's just take a very temporary halt on clearances so that we can gather where we're going with this. That happened. Very soon thereafter, the clearances went through, and I have never been muzzled and never been told that I couldn't say anything I wanted to say on television, exactly like I'm doing right now with you. So that was really a misrepresentation. I'm not being muzzled.
Doctor, one thing I want to ask is that one concern people have expressed is that when you look at the flu, you often think of people with pre-existing conditions. Older people would be susceptible to having, catastrophic effects of that. Now, what you're seeing with the coronavirus, you are seeing a teacher, you're seeing some young people, some seemingly healthy people. Is that the big distinction here? Should people be panicked about that?
Well, that's a good point. It really isn't that much of a distinction. For sure, the overwhelming majority of people who get into trouble with serious disease that would lead to the necessity of intensive care and even death are elderly people and people with underlying conditions, heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, things like that. But every once in a while, you get someone who is apparently perfectly normal, young and healthy, who gets afflicted and gets seriously ill and even dies. That's much more unusual than the standard situation of people with underlying conditions. We see that with influenza. Influenza is the same thing. Mostly people who are elderly, people who have underlying conditions. But every once in a while, you get the situation where an otherwise healthy college student gets influenza and dies. That will happen.
Doctor, we don't have much time, but would you play it forward for a second for me? What will the next week or two look like? I know you can't predict, but give people a sense.
Well, I really think we have to get used to seeing additional cases that are going to prop up in the community in which there was no identified source. The American people need to really realize that, and it's unrealistic to think it's not going to happen. It's how we handle it that's important. Yeah. State and local health authorities, together with the CDC, doing that identification, isolation, and contact tracing.
Dr. Fauci, thank you so much for giving us your time this morning. No muzzle here.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.